What, did you think that we were done with the current batch of information for Unicorn Overlord? Well, I mean, that's fair, because honestly, so did I, but here we are. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. As I always say, if you enjoy my content and this video, a like on the video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. And as a reminder, I've talked about it a couple of times in the last few videos, but if you would like to have a custom character that is part of my army when we start streaming Unicorn Overlord on March 8th when it is released to the general public, then you can consider joining my Patreon at the appropriate tier. If you do so, you will be guaranteed to have a character created by me to your exact specifications, class, growth rates, gender if we're able to choose it, actual design, color scheme, etc., and you will be used throughout the entirety of the campaign. So if you would like to do that, you'd be supporting me directly, it would mean the world, and you'll also get some other benefits like being shouted out every Friday. So thank you so much if you decide to do that, and thank you to everyone else who has already signed up. There's a number of you at this point. With that said though, what are we talking about today? Well, even though I had already gleaned as much information as I felt like I could from the pre-release material that dropped over the last couple of days, it turns out Vanillaware wasn't done, as an interview with Famitsu was published as of yesterday, and it was actually translated and posted in part on Reddit by Grave Robber J in the JRPG subreddit. So thank you to that, and thank you to those of you in the comments who pointed out that this interview existed, because I might have missed it otherwise. There's a few interesting things to talk about in this interview, including some clarifications and elaborations on things we've been theorizing about. So I'm going to read the relevant bits here and discuss what it means for the game and how I feel about it. If you'd like to read the translated bits for yourself, I have a link to it in the description, and the link to the Reddit post has a link to the Famitsu post itself if you'd like to do your part to try and translate more of it. Also, of course, this is a translation done by fans, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but from what we're seeing here, it seems pretty on point and accurate to what I would expect, so I think it's fairly legit. We will be reading answers primarily from Noma, who is the game's director, as well as primary artist and, I believe, programmer, so pretty big name on the project, and he has some interesting insights into the design choices of the game. First off, world exploration. This is something we've been theorizing about back and forth. Even my video yesterday was saying, well, maybe what we were thinking that we would see with an open world isn't quite open world, but a more linear game with different paths on how you can get to each objective, yada, yada, yada. No, not in the slightest. Per Noma's words here, he says, since the entire in-game world is connected on a single map and the field itself is vast, it becomes impossible to lie about it to the player. For example, if you just show a map and say there are 100,000 soldiers in this grassland, so we must avoid them, the scene still works even if the soldiers don't actually exist in the game. However, in this work, you can actually go to that location and you'd find there aren't actually 100,000 soldiers there, so the story had to be constructed without using expressions like that, which was challenging. Continuing on, he says, personally, I enjoy RPGs with a high degree of freedom. The way the player decides to move around the map is part of the story they are creating for themselves. If a player thinks, let's move south first and then attack from there, moving northward, that will be an experience unique to them. With that in mind, I thought it would be easier and more natural to create a story where we focused on the characters and events of a given region, allowing them to be completed in any order. Of course, there may be situations where you'll be asked, this area may be tough, are you sure you want to proceed? So there you go. Straight from the horse's mouth, all postulating and theorizing aside, Unicorn Overlord is an open world, and you apparently will be able to approach the campaign in any order that you would like. Now, something that I had talked about before is the fact that, well, surely there will be areas that are more dangerous than others, and Noma himself does address that here, where the game will tell you, hey, this area might be pretty tough, are you sure you want to go there? But you can still go there if you want. And you know what? For challenge runs, people who are looking to maybe get some high-level rewards early, kind of cheat the system, quote-unquote, a little bit and get some cool stuff, sounds good to me. We know for a fact, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you'll be able to approach this game however you would like. So if you want to go to the land of angels and griffins and get all of those, cool. If you want to go get a bunch of witches first, be my guest. If you want to hit up the shamans and the werewolves, have at it. You can do whatever you want. And that is going to be a very, very interesting approach to a turn-based strategy RPG that I legitimately have never encountered before. If there are examples of it, by all means, let me know in the comments, but I've never seen anything like this before, and I'm extremely excited about it. Now, you might be wondering, though, what does that mean for the story? And that's kind of one of the things that I was thinking about as well, right? When you think of a turn-based strategy RPG, you think of things like Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Ogre, Fire Emblem, then maybe examples that I haven't really had any experience with, like Brigandine and things like that. But they all, from my experience, are pretty linear. Like, you go from one map to another, and you get your story, and it progresses the way that you would kind of expect it to progress based on that linear progression. Well, Noma has something to say about that as well. He was asked, I understand that order of capturing each region is up to the player, but does the order chosen impact the story at all? And Noma says, there are some differences depending on the presence or absence of certain characters or overall progress in the story, but none that would greatly impact the overall scenario. As there are no extreme changes, feel free to proceed with your choice confidently. So it sounds like whatever the writing situation for Unicorn Overlord is, it will largely end up in the same place no matter where you go first. That is interesting to me, and right off the bat, I would assume that that means that the overall story that Elaine is experiencing will have two facets to it. One, the stories of the individuals and groups that he winds up encountering along the journey to wherever it is that he's trying to go. No matter where it is you go first or second or third, those individual stories are largely independent of one another, and maybe there'll be certain characters that chime in here and there if they're present or not, but overall, each story is its own little beat along the path, right? Then, on the other side of things, there would be the main plot, wherein you have major events that happen, major confrontations with enemy characters, etc., that also would have to be largely independent from one another, except for maybe a general acknowledging, oh, you defeated my superior before, whereas maybe if you didn't defeat that superior, they would say, aha, well, you may defeat me, but wait until you encounter my superior, right? But you're still going to have that progression where you're going to be taking out each individual general or leader or traitor or what have you on your way to defeating the big bad. That's what it sounds like it's going to be to me, and it'll be interesting to see what different insights and perhaps little bits of story and lore and whatnot come out based on who you have with you and what other story beats you've done prior to getting to those major points. Will this work? I mean, only time will tell. I don't really know that I've played much like this in the past that has to be so freeform with its writing while still telling a cohesive narrative. It's absolutely something that could blow up in their faces, but of course, Vanillaware is very well known for their storytelling, so they at least have some chops to back up this exceedingly ambitious goal here, this view that is different, to say the least. But I'm excited to see how it plays out. I think it'll be good. Most likely, it'll be good. However, story and map progression are not the only things that we have to talk about here. We also have confirmation that Elaine's viewpoint is the sole viewpoint of the story. It is said in the interview that basically the story advances through Elaine's view. There are some scenes where Elaine will be absent, but he is the sole protagonist. So for those of you who are hoping for a perhaps female protagonist that you can choose, I'm sorry, but this is the story of a very specific individual, as if you were reading a novel through the eyes of an individual, right? Now, that said, that does allow for a much more focused writing scenario, which I think is good, seeing as how there's already a lot that the writing team would have to account for, given this free-form, not quite branching narrative, but very loosey-goosey approach that a player can take to the campaign. So having one protagonist with one solid through line of a story, I think is probably the right choice. If there's a sequel or something somewhere along the way for Unicorn Overlord, then maybe they can consider having two different protagonists with different stories or something like that. But this is their first attempt at something like this. Let's have a little bit of a more focused view, shall we? Another question that I've gotten a lot, and I've been wondering about myself, is there permadeath? Obviously, in a lot of other turn-based strategy games, permadeath is a big deal. In Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre, you have to consider if your characters are on the battlefield, can you go out of your way to res them if they go down, or do you risk potentially having them die while you make a mad rush to complete the mission? In Fire Emblem, if a character's HP is depleted, period, unless you're on certain difficulty modes, they're just gone forever. With the exception of maybe a certain game here or there that has like a staff or a spring you can use once to resurrect a unit. It's a pretty serious deal, and as such, a lot of turn-based strategy RPG players kind of expect that there'll be permadeath, and that was something that was addressed here as well. The question asked was, when a character falls in battle, are there any disadvantages such as the death of the character? And game writer Nakanishi said, permadeath does not exist. However, they go on to say that they will be unable to be resorted on that stage, so you'll need to handle them with care. There was a lot of discussion as to whether or not to implement permadeath, but we ultimately decided not to. And honestly, I'm kind of disappointed by that, if we're being completely honest here. Something that I've always enjoyed so much about turn-based strategy RPGs is the idea that you're fighting a war, and your units are real soldiers, at least more so than in traditional RPGs, where no matter how many times a party member gets knocked down in Final Fantasy VI, you can use a Phoenix Down or some Raise Magic and get them back on their feet, right? In Unicorn Overlord, I kind of saw an opportunity to live out that idea in a more serious manner than something like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics. The idea of an ogre battle style game is that you're commanding an army. And that's clearly something that we've seen here with Unicorn Overlord. You have far more units in play, even in the early game, than you would ever see in an equivalent type of title. And as the game goes on, those numbers are only going to balloon. You've got named characters, you've got generic characters, you've got potentially semi-generic characters, a huge swath of soldiers at your command, and it makes sense that some of them aren't going to survive the campaign, right? The idea that you're going to send a group out there and maybe a bad crit happens and you lose a knight or a mage or a cleric. And yeah, you'll probably be able to survive the battle, but before the next one, you're going to have to look at rearranging your squads, hitting up a town to hire a new unit to replace them. Maybe you have to train that unit up to be able to fulfill the same or even a better role than their predecessor. That's interesting. That's exciting. And to know that it doesn't exist in Unicorn Overlord is a little bit of a shame. Now, notably, this is something that Symphony of War, the Nephilim Saga, did as well. In Symphony of War, the only time that you have permadeath is if you're playing on insane difficulty, which you only unlock once you've completed the game once. On any other difficulty, a unit gets killed in the course of battle, but then by the end of the fight, they come back and you can continue on as you were. And yeah, it didn't really negatively impact the flow of the game. You still hire new units, you find them around maps, etc., etc. You can continue to build out your squads, and because you need so many units, it still is helpful to find new units, to hire new units. And I imagine it'll be largely the same in Unicorn Overlord, but I don't know. I was hoping for permadeath to be a thing so that you had to really be careful and thoughtful about how you designed your squads, about how you designed your stratagems. And knowing it's not going to be there puts a little bit of a damper on things for me. Do I think it'll ruin the game or anything? No, absolutely not. But it is a big deal. I've always loved a permadeath system in games like this, so I will miss it since it's not going to be here. Now, that said, a lot of people have asked as well, how difficult is the game going to be? Are there going to be difficulty modes, and what will those difficulty modes entail? And this isn't something that was directly addressed in the Famitsu article, but it is something that a few people pointed out in the comments of my previous video, so I figured we'd talk about it here really quick as well. I previously stated that we knew there were going to be difficulty modes, but we didn't know what they were going to be exactly. However, apparently, the official website, and I must have missed this because I was perusing the official website yesterday when I was making my previous video, has a section where it talks about the 3 difficulty levels that you can choose, which are, according to Average Man 7769 in the comments, thank you, by the way, for pointing this out, Story, Tactical, and Expert. From what we have seen, they can be changed at any time in the options menu, so if a difficulty feels too easy or too difficult, you can swap things around. And we haven't seen anything to indicate that there are any bonus rewards or penalties for playing on a higher or lower difficulty, respectively. This sounds pretty standard. It pretty much sounds like what something like, say, Fire Emblem would do, and I'll probably be playing on Expert when the game comes out on March 8th, but there's a little bit more confirmation there than I realized, so I figured I would toss this in there for those who did not know. Finally, this is another little bit, not part of the Famitsu article, but I wanted to bring it up here as I've had a number of questions about it. Yes, there is actually generic unit hiring and unit customization. I've had a lot of viewers and questions, I guess, who did not see some of my earlier videos about Unicorn Overlord. You should go check those out if you're curious, by the way, because I have answers to questions like this. But who were surprised to hear that apparently unit customization was confirmed, and it is. We've seen exactly one screen, from what I know, where you can hire a unit, select their name, their class, what their color scheme is, what their armor type is, what their growth rates are, and there may be other customization options as well that we haven't seen, but it is absolutely 100% confirmed that you will be able to hire and customize generics. There's also a swath of unique characters as well, but I imagine as the game goes on, you're going to need a healthy mix of both. So if you're someone who likes to be able to customize your characters in a JRPG like this, whether it be a regular JRPG or turn-based strategy RPG, or you're someone who wants to be part of our campaign when we stream, there's going to be a little bit of something there for everyone. So I figured I'd toss that in there as a little bit of a reminder. That said, that is all there is to say today about this Famitsu article. If you have read it for yourself and there's other interesting tidbits that you would like to point out, by all means, please drop it in the comments. I was not expecting to make this video today, but here we are. As we continue to approach the release of Unicorn Overlord, I will of course be covering any other news that comes out, and I'm currently in the process of editing the very first Unicorn Overlord cooking video that myself and my girlfriend Jane recorded a while back. Our goal is to try and release as many of these as possible leading up to the release of, as well as continuing to release them after the game comes out, wherein we recreate recipes from the game, because Vanillaware food just looks too damn good, and we love to cook and we love to eat, and we'd like to be able to share that with you guys. So look forward to that very soon. I'm hoping to have it out within the week. We'll see if that's a little bit of an ambitious goal. With that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.